Welcome into the Independent Thinking Podcast. This is your host, Rob Stott. Already with this episode, number 100, you probably notice a little bit of a different cadence, if you will, to how we're going to run this podcast. What you didn't hear at the top was what we like to call the cold open, the short clip, the sizzle, the hook, whatever you want to call it, the little bit of audio at the top of the episode that we usually use to get you interested in listening to, what's to come on this episode of the Independent Thinking Podcast. But here we are sitting in mid-December of 2021, and we are at episode 100. So we thought, what better opportunity, as we wrap up 2021 and think ahead to 22, to look back at, some of the best of the Independent Thinking Podcast. We've got 99 other episodes to, look back on and have a lot of stories that we've told over the 2 years that we've been doing this. December 18th of 2019 was the first episode that we published of the podcast when we were in Houston and getting ready for primetime in Houston that year in February of 2020, and kicked things off with Mr. Tom Hickman. And since then we've been rolling just about on a weekly basis. You figure almost 2 years to the day. We should be sitting 52 weeks in a year, about 52 episodes a year. So we should be at 104 right now. We're a little short of that, and I have to apologize because somewhere in there, I say somewhere, but I know specifically when. It was September 17th when this host of this podcast had to go on paternity leave to, spend some time with the wife and our new kid and our second addition to the family. So that's why we're only just now getting to episode 100 instead of 104. But no, it's been quite the ride. We're going to have some fun with this episode this week and take a look back at just over 10. I think we got 11 or 12 episodes that, some of the most memorable moments of this podcast. It's been a lot of fun to do. And like I said, a lot of fun to share the stories. And we're going to look back at some of those quick hits and those greatest hits, if you will, of the Independent Thinking Podcast. But something I want to call out, there are 99 episodes. We're only calling out about a tenth of them. But so many other great things have happened on this podcast. I mean, you think they've averaged about a half hour each, and we're talking about this being the 100th episode. So 50 hours, almost 50 hours, give or take a couple of minutes of content and stories that we've shared, of the independent retail channel. And that includes everything from members to vendors to, industry partners and members of the nationwide team. Just so many great stories. And I think back to some of them, and they include everything from talking to Perch and Nest, who helped us develop and build and implement the tiny home that has made its presence known at primetime over the past couple of years, and also those industry groups. You got the NKBA, National Kitchen and Bath Association, NFIB, National Federation of Independent Businesses, CEDIA, the Consumer Tech Association, Independent We Stand. So many great partners of this industry, of the independent retail channel, and so many others as well. And then Google, of course, done episodes with them. We had a 5-part series with our trade partners where we had them on to talk about trends early on in the pandemic. I think that was back in the summer of 2020 when we had all 5 different episodes with our trade partners. And then, of course, Azione, when we welcomed the Azione Unlimited team, Richard and their team, and then one of their members as well, Cybermanor. Different episodes too, not always just the standard Q&A. We had Mr. Tom Hickman. We had a mailbag episode with some submitted questions. Mike Whitaker interviewed me on an episode. He turned the mic around without me knowing it was going to happen and interviewed me. And then also, the Sleep Retailer podcast comes to mind, where they had me on an episode to talk about some trends, and then having that episode, hosting that episode right here on our podcast. So there's just been so many different memories and things that we've gone through. This is a little bit nostalgic to kind of look back and think about what we've been able to accomplish in 2 years. But like I said a few minutes ago, it all started back in Houston in December of 2019 when we got to sit down with Tom Hickman, our president and chief member advocate for Nationwide, just to see why. I was a 2-month-old employee at the time. I'd come over from a trade partner and wanted to pick his brain a little bit about why the efforts around communications were so pronounced, and where he kind of set the course for us to head, not just from a communications department but from Nationwide as well. So We'll start our first memorable clip. We'll go right there back to the beginnings of this podcast, and this is what Tom had to say. This communications team has really been built out kind of quickly. So what's the why the emphasis there on communications for Nationwide?
Yeah, it's a great question. So for forever, which as long as the company's been in business, Nationwide has been this kind of quiet partner that helps serve the independent channel. And we, it's never really about Nationwide. It's always about our retailers and the name that's on their door. But as we started to realize that over time that we needed to kind of get the word out about what we were doing, it was important. We were running into members and vendors that were going, you guys do so much, and there's so many things that you do that we don't know about. We looked at this as one way to be able to kind of build that message out, was to be able to have a communications team that told our story externally a little more and quite frankly internally. So we had always had, I think, an incredible brand. We didn't spend a lot of time talking about that brand, and quite frankly we didn't spend a lot of time standing on a soapbox about the independent retailer. And so Amy was the first big piece of that, helped us with some brand messaging story earlier a few years ago, and did an incredible job, truly understood what we were trying to do, got us thinking differently about our brand and the way we need to talk about our brand in the market, and then obviously our time with you. So it just seemed like a natural thing for us to do.
Again, cool just to, I think, hear his take on why communications is so important and why Nationwide at that time, back in mid 2019, really, when we brought in Amy Kroom as director of PR and comms, and then quickly expanded that team over a short period of time. Just cool to hear, his message then and how it still resonates today, and just the strides and efforts we've made since then. Obviously launching a podcast, adding a website, building out the independent thinking website. Just a lot of cool milestones have been accomplished in those 2 years. So it all started then, and excited to obviously get to look back at it and re-listen to those words and that message from Tom. So, but moving right along, memorable moment number 2 of the Independent Thinking podcast. We don't have to go too far from that first episode, and we go right to episode 2, which was our first member interview. We had Grant Webb from Webb's Home Store. Guy that, if you were in Nashville with us at primetime, name probably rings a bell. He was also in Houston for that primetime. We had an indoor concert with him there, and then next time we got the opportunity to be in person, kicked it up a couple notches for him, and got him an opportunity to accomplish a lifelong goal of his, and that was to perform on the stage of the Grand Ole Opry. So, but thinking back to that first member interview in early 2020 and getting to talk to Grant, and this is just a little snippet of that conversation. The hometown side of this, what's it like to sort of change that conversation from one where, you understand the backstory, but you have to kind of simplify it for people that are your friends and neighbors?
Any good business plan starts by a good level of respect of, I'm going to respect you, and Rob, I want to hear what you have to ask. Every business needs it, every customer, and literally even Nationwide with its members, we need that communication together.
I think the cool thing there is that that's a message that he shares that still resonates. One of just respect in the way you talk to not only customers, but from a Nationwide perspective, how we work with our members and each other and those in the industry. Just a really cool message to hear, and one that I think, again, stated on episode 2, but still resonates today. But skipping ahead, a couple more episodes. This next clip comes from episode 6. It was probably one, it was early on, but I think still one of the favorite episodes that I ever got to do here at Nationwide. And that's, I think about just kind of how our relationship's grown since then, and just the work we've been able to do, get together, and how lucky we are to have a guy like Doug Marsh on this team. And, just a couple months into this thing and doing this podcast, he was kind enough, we refer to him as our resident historian here at Nationwide. He's done a little bit of everything and worked in every role and every department. And, it's awesome to be able to pick his brain about just how things have evolved and how the company has grown. And he's seen it. He's been here for just about 2 decades and has been through it all. So on top of diving into the history of Nationwide during that 6th episode of the Independent Thinking podcast, we also got the chance to kind of reflect on, the growth he's seen. And, here's what he had to say on that. One of my early impressions is that there's a lot of talented people that can do a lot of different things. So, I just think about the 20 years that you've been involved in working with Nationwide to see it grow to where it is today. Something that we'll certainly be talking about here. But what's sort of your impression of how the company has changed just in your time being here?
To try to put the perspective into it, the first show I went to, I thought I was a mid 20-year-old kid, and I thought it was the greatest thing I'd ever seen. It was 50,000 square feet of stuff, and
wow.
We'll be going to a show here in Houston here very soon, and we're going to have almost 200,000 square feet or whatever it is. The team that we put together over the last 20 years is incredible. We're growing, and to be so focused on our members every day, it's a great team, and it's really been interesting to see the change in the 20 years.
Like I said, just fun to always talk to Doug, and we've had him on a couple of times. So we did that history episode, the history of Nationwide, and of course, we had another episode a little later on talking about the history of primetime. Dove a little bit deeper into that, and that was around the time we were getting ready for our first ever virtual primetime. So I figured it was a cool time to be able to reflect on, where primetime has been, how it's grown, and then of course, we'll get into it a little later, but how primetime evolved into that, the virtual format as we were living through and continue to live through today, a pandemic here. But so moving along, we got, we go from talking about the history of Nationwide to our time together in Houston. And, this one stands out because I don't know how many people can say they've had I guess unless you're specifically hosting a podcast for NASA or a science related or astrology related, astronomy, something space related podcast, I guess you would have an astronaut. But on a retail podcast, how often are you going to have an astronaut come and talk to you and try to relate their experiences fixing the Hubble telescope to what we're doing here on a daily basis for the Independent Retail channel, and of course, to our members as well. But that's exactly what we had when we had Mike Massimino join us in Houston for primetime down there back in February of 2020. And I was lucky enough, Mike, I didn't scare him away. I was excited to get him on the podcast and hovered around him until after his keynote, and I guess coerced and convinced him that he should spend a few minutes chatting with us. But he, give him credit. It was one of, I think, the more memorable keynotes I've experienced, going to prime times, and one that he still, despite his out of this world, quite literally, experiences as a professional, took his message and related it down to, the independent business owner, and did so in a really eloquent and I think successful way. And this is what it was. This is how he did it.
I had this real interest and passion that I felt like I could not be happy unless I tried. I would be okay, I think, but I don't think I could have accepted giving up. And I think I've learned in life that you can control the effort, but not the outcome.
You had some really excellent messages from your time in space and working with NASA. And the two things that sort of stuck with me were just leadership and teamwork.
When I had my moments of making mistakes and messing up our mission, I knew that my team was still with me. They kept me going, and no one was going to throw me under the bus. And that's a good way to go. If you're going to go down, you're going to go down with your best friends. And that's the way I felt about it.
And that was certainly a fun interview for other reasons as well. Yeah, obviously being able to talk to him about what it was like working on the Hubble telescope, almost breaking the Hubble telescope at one point, and how they work through that adversity, and again, applying it to independent retail. So cool conversation, one that I certainly will never forget. And I don't know, next time I'll be able to have an astronaut on the podcast. So that it might have been a first and only. So a lot of fun. But moving on. We moved from Houston to, just a few months later when we essentially saw the world shut down and change, and overnight with the coming of COVID-19 and the pandemic that has just wrought the retail industry and every industry and changed kind of the way we live and operate. And just so many things have changed, and it's still obviously in the conversation today. But, the first mention of it on the podcast was episode 18 with Mr. Jeff Rose, our senior merchant for the furniture and bedding division. And it was the first time we talked about it here on the podcast. And I mean, we'll share a little bit of the conversation here, but just thinking back to some of those things that at that point, this was in early April of 2020. And, some of the conversations we had were around things like Tiger King and it only being 7 weeks into the pandemic and wondering when things were going to change and get back to normal, and just how long those 7 weeks had been. But obviously a kind of milestone moment, in our space for Nationwide Marketing Group. And I think, just a crazy time to look back on because of how quickly, not only Nationwide had to pivot, but every independent retailer in this space, and the efforts that were made to help stores keep their doors open. And for those that couldn't, ways to ensure they were, still able to come through the other side, able to operate. And just a lot of crazy stuff that, looking back on that time, that is crazy to think we're still dealing with it in some ways and in some shape or form. But it was the outlook was so uncertain at that time, and that's kind of the sense we got in talking with Jeff, is just not knowing what to expect, and just having to adjust and support retailers through it all. So this was the first look and the first mentions of COVID-19 on our Independent Thinking podcast here with Jeff Rose.
We were coming out of January and February. We were rolling, to be quite honest with you. Just business wise, the furniture and bedding division was. I mean, we had just an incredible furniture market. It was the largest attended furniture market we've had in the nationwide space. I mean, it was massive. And then we came out of prime time, and we had the biggest prime time we've ever had sales wise. And then we got smacked in the face with this COVID-19 craziness, and then got to be home. We're all in this together fighting, but it's been, I think we're 7 weeks into this, and it's just, we're hoping to start seeing the light.
When you think about not being on the road, I think that's probably a big one for you and for anyone working from home, especially not being able to go see these members. But what has, aside from that, maybe what has been the biggest challenge for you as director of furniture and bedding for Nationwide, in the first 7, crazy, it's already been 7 weeks, but
the biggest challenge I've had of all this is trying to figure out when it's going to end, because, you don't want to start planning things too early to push out for members, because there's no one in the streets right now. And then you don't want to wait too late. And so my team has been working extremely hard on getting that blueprint and game plan together for the membership. It's just trying to figure out the best time to launch it and push it out.
Again, I can't reiterate it enough. I don't think, just funny to look back on, talking about how it had only been 7 weeks, and just there seemed to be light at the end of the tunnel, and things will get back to normal here soon enough. And now, almost 2 years later, we're still feeling the effects and dealing with the effects of this pandemic on supply chain and labor challenges, and something that doesn't seem to be leaving the conversation of our space anytime soon. So, that was the first mention of it, and that was the first time we talked about it sort of internally on a external podcast, but internally with a member of the Nationwide team. And then, of course, you had the first mention of it in an interview with a member. And of course, all the while, we're changing how we do podcasts, moving from doing them on the road or at shows to now having to do them through Teams. Microsoft Teams is a platform we use, and of course, moving over to Zoom at some point here too. But the first member we got to interview and talk to about it was PJ Orsini of Orsini's. And, some of the things, it's just funny, again, to look back on and think about the things that were sort of the top of mind during the conversation about how to continue to operate during, what we were operating through, and how much he relied on digital at the time, and implementing new technologies into his website like chat and just all kinds of different stuff. But this was just a little taste of what that conversation was like here with PJ Orsini on the Independent Thinking podcast. For Orsini's in particular, how have you been impacted and how have you sort of been monitoring this and adjusting business, over these last 6-7 weeks?
We'll take aside all of the sanitation and the health things you have to do because
Right.
we're all doing that. Just taking advantage of what's been in front of us, like with the RWS website we have. The chat's been a great addition to what we do. It's brought us a lot of people.
With this paycheck protection program, how easy was the process or how difficult was the process to go through from start to finish for you guys?
It was the easiest thing I've ever done to borrow money. To me, it was a no-brainer.
Again, you just go back to the topics that, we were sitting there talking with PJ about. And I mean, it's everything from keeping the store clean to, implementing those tools like chat and, online appointment scheduling and ensuring that, you only had one customer in the store at a time. And obviously all of the protection gear from masks and the screens that you put up and the plastic barriers and things like that. And all the way through to that PPP, the program that the government launched to help, stores that were in need of some dire funding as they were asked to shut down. And it's just crazy how rapidly things were moving during those early days and weeks of the pandemic. And we saw literally billions and billions of dollars funneled into various industries to provide government support through an incredibly uncertain time. And it was strange, and it continues to be strange. And it's, something that the challenges are different now, but the technologies and everything that was kind of set up at the front end of this thing is still supporting retailers today. And we're seeing that through, the continued use and customers becoming familiar with and, expecting websites to have things like chat or, we later on in the podcast, more recently, just a couple of weeks ago, talked about alternative payment methods and, things like that with allowing customers to pay how they want and offering multiple ways to pay. And it's unreal. And it certainly has changed the retail landscape. And we often hear about, pushing the pedal to the metal and fast forwarding this industry by so many years. And it's true. And, we experienced some of that on our, within the Nationwide team as well, having to shift from doing in-person prime times twice a year to, all of a sudden seeing our August 2020 show canceled at a Las Vegas and, replaced with a virtual show just a few months later. And, that's kind of where we pick up with our next clip is talking with Melissa Stenson, our VP of member experience here at Nationwide about, what it was like to prep and take a show that usually has hundreds of thousands of square footage space on an expo floor or in an expo hall and having to convert that to a virtual showroom and a virtual expo show. So so many different, retail, obviously we're so focused on it and how that changed at the time and continues to change. But the event space is one that, was also hit incredibly hard. So always, I think one of the more interesting conversations talking with Mel, who has that, experience as an event professional, but also being tied closely to what we do here at Nationwide with the independent retail channel. So a fun one to pick her brain on and kind of learn how she was adjusting all the while, the independent retail channel is adjusting. So this is Melissa Stenson talking about our efforts to launch a virtual primetime. When you're thinking about the specific portions of primetime, was there, one or two things that you wanted to focus on to make sure we have to get this right, to make sure that this event is what we want it to be?
The education was important for us. The other piece is the exhibit hall and getting our members, close to our vendor partners. As soon as we do get back together, we're going to have a great big primetime party. But until then, we do want to make sure that we have a way to talk to these members. There's a place for it going forward. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what 2021 brings.
Interesting to say the least, because the virtual event, for as able as it was to allow vendors and members and Nationwide the Nationwide team to still communicate and engage with one another while we were forced to be separate. It set up what was an incredible, I think, return to in-person events this past August in Nashville, and we certainly had quite the shindig while we were there. But to Mel's point, the ability to have a virtual show, a virtual presence, I think we've seen it in the continued iterations of virtual primetime. Even though we were back in person this August, we did allow for a virtual platform to launch. And I think she said it at the top there about education and leaning more heavily into providing education. And we found that the virtual platform was a great way to ensure that whether you were with us in person or unable to attend, you still had access to that education. Why limit it to just those individuals that, can make the commitment to be with us in person, because it's such valuable information. You want to get it in the hands of as many independent retailers as possible, because the old saying, the high tides raise all ships. So I want to get that education out there to as many people as possible. Now, changing courses completely. We've talked a lot about coronavirus and COVID and how that's kind of permeated conversations for the better portion of the independent retail podcast we've been able to publish here at Nationwide. But we've had some other conversations that I think were incredibly interesting that had nothing to do with COVID. And it's nice to get some of those included in here as well. And one of those comes to us from episode number 49 with Sherman's. We spoke with Paul Sherman and a member of his delivery team, Antoine, who heads up the delivery team there, about something that was incredibly unique in the way that they train their delivery team members. And it's boiled down to the fact that Paul Sherman built a house in the warehouse space that he has there at Sherman's. And just a crazy conversation. One, you talk about how you can think differently, think outside the box as an independent retailer, and Paul has certainly done that. Building a program, the Respect Delivery program that they've built out to ensure that before one of their delivery guys even gets a set of keys to a truck, that they've gone through this multi-point, certification process basically to get themselves up and running and trained as a delivery professional without having to do, on-site training. You don't have to do it in front of a customer who's sitting there nervously watching you move a giant refrigerator through tight corners. You can actually, they set it up where this house allows them to train within their own warehouse without, potentially causing damage or anything like that. So it's had a lot of benefits to them. Obviously a major investment, but one that has paid off for them by not having those instances. And of course, just upping the level of customer service that they provide. So this is Paul Sherman and Antoine talking about the Respect Delivery program and the home that they built for their delivery team out there at Sherman's.
When Antoine started, then we went out and we said, okay, what do you guys really need? What do you need to train with? And then, of course, you get back. Yeah, we need like a doorway to go through, maybe a bigger one and a smaller one, maybe one with a stair, like simulating coming in from the garage. And we certainly need, gas and water connections, different types of gas and water. We should probably show copper, gas pipe, what you don't connect to too. And we need the stack laundry and side-by-side laundry and a dishwasher simulated where somebody put a floor, in front of it to make it harder. And I need a ceiling fan that's low, and pictures on the wall. That's you see where I'm going, right?
You're kind of describing a house.
Yes, we're describing a house. So when you ask everybody on the team, what do you need to properly train your folks? The only answer became to build a house. And that, at first, of course, we thought that absurd. But then when you really think about, okay, how are we training people? Well, how does anybody train people?
Right. And that was kind of the question that this begs is, without having a house to train in, what is, maybe Antoine, this is something you can kind of tackle. How do you train a team to deliver in a house? Is it literally the way you train is by going into people's homes, or, what, is there anything you can do when you're not on an actual delivery to train?
Yes. Well, we usually used to start with, showing how to, take fridges apart, put cords on, the day-to-day regimen of what you'll be going through. And then we had the tough task of, you have to do that real time in front of a customer who you're trying to satisfy at the same time, which poses a lot of challenges. Customers watching, you're trying to learn. It frustrates a new guy if he makes a mistake right there. Plus, you could possibly damage the customer's home and some of Sherman's reputation in the process. So it was tough, and we tried to do it, and you can definitely see the difference in us being able to have a more specialized crew out there, and the customer doesn't have to watch us in the process of training.
Still, I think one of the coolest conversations, just talking about how they built a house for their delivery team. I mean, a house, a functional house with the knobs, the stairways, the the rooms, the furnishings, everything. You could live in that house if you wanted to, but using it as a training facility, I think, has certainly paid off for them. So awesome story, and one of course, like all of these, that we were happy to share. But another one, getting a little bit more into the partnership side of things with Nationwide. 2021 saw us announce our HTSN division, Home Technology Specialist Nationwide, partnering with Cedia. We mentioned just a little bit ago with Melissa about virtual primetime really leaning into education. Well, education was one of the major pillars of the partnership between Cedia and HTSN, and launching a program where HTSN dealers received free membership into Cedia, supported by HTSN, which gives them all the benefits of being a full Cedia member. And in addition to that, an education credit. We sat down, not long after the partnership was announced, with Giles Sutton, who at the time was co-interim CEO for Cedia, and talked about what excited him about the partnership and where he saw things going. Cedia and HTSN, our custom integration group here within Nationwide, announced a partnership not long ago, focused around, as we've been talking a lot about here during this podcast, education. So talk to me about, what excites you the most about this partnership with HTSN and our dealers here at Nationwide.
Well, it's a thrilling partnership for me because, firstly, Nationwide being the North America's largest buying group for independent retailers, but also, HTSN within that, the focus on the custom integrator as well, and really HTSN really showing a focus and a commitment to delivering education and increasing professionalism to their members. And really seeing that HTSN have aligned with our goals as well, really. And some of those pieces we spoke about earlier, the pieces to the partnership match our strategic goals as well. And I can dive into a little bit more about those in a bit, but it being focused on driving more opportunity to HTSN members through learning, through opportunities to perhaps engage with the design and build community as well. But fundamentally for us, it's a really bold statement with HTSN making the investment in Cedia membership and actually buying membership for all of the HTSN members. For us, that shows a great commitment and partnership, and I couldn't be more excited about it.
That's, a partnership that I really have enjoyed watching flourish, and members get more involved with Cedia. And, again, to the point that you can never have enough education, certainly in the custom integration space, any space really, but, the value of education, it's hard to put a dollar on it. And just awesome to see Hank and the HTSN team and Giles and the Cedia team, come together and build that partnership out. So only a couple left. We're down to the final ones here. Final couple clips of some of our most memorable podcasts. And this one, the next two, I have super special meaning to me for a number of reasons, but it's more on the human side of things. And we'll set it up. This first one, just a couple of weeks ago, episode 91, we talked to Larry Wright of CNC Appliances down in Louisiana, and met Larry at Primetime in Nashville, and was struck by his story of how he came into owning CNC Appliances. A guy that went to school for education, wanted to become a teacher, and did that for a little bit, and ended up back at CNC, working under the owner Roger LeBlanc, and the opportunity was presented to him and his wife to own the business. He went from job to job within CNC, and ultimately, Roger decided that when it was time to step aside and move on from the business, he approached Larry with the opportunity to purchase it. And it's something Larry never expected, as we got into in the podcast, but one he also couldn't turn down when he figured out how, Roger worked it so that, he could eventually, over a number of years, buy the business from him. So succession planning, it kind of boils down to succession planning, which is a topic that doesn't get a lot of attention in this space, but is super critical. I mean, you talk about generational, multi-generational businesses, and seeing retailers pass down their business from one generation to the next, or from, in CNC's case, one owner to the next, and it ensures the long-term success of a business. So we took that opportunity and that story, the opportunity to tell that story and use it in a way to talk about the importance of succession planning. And Larry did an awesome job, and this portion of the podcast we're sharing right here is one that gave me chills when we explained sort of how he was going to approach it when the time came for him to think about, you know, his succession plan, which might not be for a while, but you know, he's already put some thought to where he thinks he'll go, you know, when the time comes to move on from the business. So this is Larry Wright of CNC Appliances. It's impossible probably to envision that the situation you've gone through playing out, but you know, as you're, you know, touching every part of the business and you know, you're getting ready to move on, did it ever even once cross your mind that there was an opportunity to potentially be an owner of a retail store?
No, not at all. Until Roger said it, I hadn't even considered it because I wasn't family. Like I wasn't, neither me or my wife were related to him. It never occurred to me. And that's a big thing. Like when we talk about succession planning, I think with a lot of dealers, if their children are not interested in it, I really wish I bet a bunch of them have a person who could do it. And there's ways to make it work. There's ways to make it work.
Well, there's also the aspect too. Like he asked you, what made you want to say yes? Because that you're not, you know, as you said, you went to school for something completely different. What was it that made you feel like, yeah, maybe this is what we want to do?
Well, I definitely, me and my wife both went to school for something completely unrelated to what we do, which is plenty of people.
Yeah, for sure.
They don't. But, you know, part of it was just, he had been really successful. It had been really, really good for him. We had a ton of confidence in him and his wife in their ability to train us, in that they had been super successful. If we could just keep doing what they did, that we would be super successful. And, you know, there's a lot of appeal to being your own boss and to having that freedom that you wouldn't normally have.
Did you take anything from his succession planning and kind of how he went about it with you? And have you even started to think about that?
I really haven't, I guess, because I still have a long way to go. But I will say I don't have any children. So there's no kiddos in my life to leave it to. I mean, I have some nieces and nephews and whatnot, but that's really it. I don't have any children personally. And so I will probably be in a similar situation for him. And look, I would love to be able to change somebody's life like he changed mine. I mean, I mean, I think that's required of me. I think I should be doing that. And I always try to remember that because, I mean, he took where I was at and moved me to a whole different place that I never even saw coming or wouldn't have dreamed I'd be able to get to. And so, yeah, I mean, you got to do that.
Every time, still gives me chills. It's incredible to listen to him and the foresight that he has about how he wants to, you know, change someone's life the way that Roger changed his. It's the essence of this industry and just the people in this space and just the incredible stories that we get to share and tell and learn about. And it's a lot. It's a lot. I get a little emotional thinking about it, but just cool to see that kind of commitment to not only his store and his business, but his people. And that's really what this all boils down to is we're an industry of people. So really incredible story and one I certainly won't forget anytime soon. But we're going to close it out. You know, we're talking about company culture, and this was another awesome episode of the last one we'll highlight on this little walk down memory lane for the Independent Thinking podcast. But we talked about the importance of culture with Chris Kuster, a guy that really needs no introduction here at Nationwide Marketing Group, but our director of people and learning, one of the cooler titles that we've got here at Nationwide. And, you know, culture isn't something that it's hard to put, you know, another one of those things it's hard to put a dollar value or dollar amount on, but it's still something, as you know, we talked about in our conversations with Chris, that is important. You know, it does provide, it's a strategic initiative, something that you need to be strategic about, because it does, at the end of the day, you know, if you have a strong culture and your business is one that your consumers view as trustworthy, they're more likely to shop with you. So that in turn means you're going to have customers that are willing to, you know, spend money with you. So there is very much a business sense to, you know, what goes into developing a positive and strong culture at your company. And that's what we got into with Chris. So I think really doesn't need any additional setup, for talking to Mr. Kuster. But this is just a snippet of, our conversation about corporate culture and the importance of culture programs. And the important thing there too is, and you kind of hit really well home on it, is that this is a strategic initiative. It's not, especially in independent retail, I feel like, whether they like to hear it or not, so much of decisions made are dollars and cents based. And really, even though you don't see maybe a specific transaction happen because of your investment in culture programs like Speed of Trust, at the end of the day, it still does impact those, because to your point, you're spending efforts and time and resources to build trust with customers who you're in turn trying to sell product to. So there really is, actual dollars and cents reason why you would want to invest in a culture program like this.
Absolutely. In any culture program, right? If you want to design your own, you don't have to use Speed of Trust, but you don't even have to use the people principle. That just gives you the guideline to do it. Most people don't engage in culture because they just don't know what to do, right? They don't know how to build a culture. Therefore, they let culture define itself. But to your point of strategy, it is probably as important as your marketing strategy. It's as important as your sales strategy. It's as important as your buying strategy. Your culture strategy is not just, it's a more enjoyable place to work. Great. But it's a more productive place to work. It's a more enhanced, innovative place to work. And that list just goes on and on and on. So yeah, is it make the workplace more enjoyable? Absolutely it does. But does it make it more efficient, and more effective, more stronger work environment? Yeah, absolutely.
And Chris said it there. It's not just something that can be overlooked. It's a part of your business that, these culture programs are need to be thought about like marketing and like, your merchandising strategy. It's just something that should be second nature and part of your overall business plan. And don't get enough attention for sure. And I know, we're even making our own efforts. Chris is doing a phenomenal job. And, we Nationwide as a whole has just to see it grow over, my 2 years here, 2 years plus, and has been awesome and certainly inspiring. And I think, it feels a little bit like drinking that juice, but you want that in a company. And that's how you get a strong culture, one where everyone is working together towards a common goal and, supporting your mission, whether that's to support the independent channel or to provide just top-notch customer service to anyone who walks through your doors or logs onto your website. So that does it. That's the recap. We got 11 episodes there that we had the opportunity to highlight just about a little over a tenth of the podcasts that we've done here. And I've got nothing else to say but thank you. I mean, it's been an incredible, 2+ years of doing these podcasts and getting to talk to so many incredible individuals, and whether that's members of the Nationwide team, our vendor community, our industry partners, and absolutely last but certainly not least, our members who have just unbelievable just stories to tell and insights and wisdom, and it's something I won't get tired of, and we look forward to continuing into 2022 and beyond. But like always, we'll round this up by just saying and very sincerely meaning that I appreciate all of the listens and clicks and follows, subscribes, all of that we've had over the first 100 episodes of this podcast, and look forward to carrying it on into 22 and beyond. So appreciate you listening to the Independent Thinking Podcast, and we will catch you next time.